Minister, colleagues and friends, thanks very much for coming this morning to the launch of our research report, which I hope all of you have a copy of. Before the Minister addresses us and officially launches the report, I'm going to take you through a brief presentation that mirrors the three sections in the report itself. So the report is called Learning to Reach Out, Young People, Mental Health Literacy and the Internet, and it covers three main parts within it. An overview around the internet and mental health, which we wrote to hopefully help open up discourse in this whole area and public debate around the internet and mental health. As Elaine mentioned, it includes details of our focus group research with young people from across the country, and it also includes results from our first user profile survey of visitors to reachout.com. So in terms of an overview, there's some debate and at times a risk discourse, I think, around the internet and mental health, because maybe the internet as a resource in supporting mental health isn't very well understood by everyone at all times. So we felt it was useful to look at the ways you can categorise internet mental health supports, and one way you could categorise support online or through the internet is to think about primarily information-based resources. So resources that provide psychoeducation or provide quality information around mental health and mental health problems. And that's something that we focus on quite a bit through ReachOut.com, for example. But there is also the provision of support on a peer-to-peer basis or a person-to-person basis. And just as an example, we can think about this as being delivered by dedicated websites with moderated forums, but we can also think about this as being leveraged through social media, Facebook I'm thinking of specifically. And thirdly, there's the whole area of online therapy, which is something that's growing as well, something that we're learning more and more about all the time, and that can take the form of a therapist leading you through a program online and supporting you online, or it can take the form of computerized therapy, and there's some colleagues from Trinity here who work specifically in that area. And through our own service, we touch on more than just information-based resources. We do include an element of peer-to-peer support through common facilities on our fact sheets and our blogs. But we've just introduced something by way of online therapy as well through an Ask the Expert feature. So it's important as we develop these services that we do explore different ways and new ways of providing support. But to make sure that we do that in a safe way and a way that's guided by young people themselves, we went out around the country and we sat down with different groups of young people and we conducted our online survey. Specifically in relation to going out and talking to young people across the country. We had 6 two-hour conversations in colleges, in schools and in youth reach centres where we talked just openly and generally about mental health and asked the young people that we met, what does mental health mean to you? But beyond that, we also wanted to explore this concept of mental health literacy. So we developed 4 case studies, 3 of which depicted a mental disorder, and one depicted a young guy who was going through a tough time. And we asked the young people, we asked them to write down what they thought was going on in these scenarios. And the stories are in the reports that you've picked up. In terms of what we found as we went around the country, we found that the young people we met, for them mental health wasn't necessarily top of their mind. It was something that they came across maybe when something bad had happened, when they'd experienced a suicide in their community, for example. So they felt that the conversation around mental health is often reactive rather than proactive. They also talked about sometimes the difficulty when it comes to talking and opening up around mental health, and by the same token, the importance of listening. So one group in particular, down in Bantry, they were a fantastic group of young lads from the Youth Reach Centre there, and they talked over each other an awful lot, and it was really, really hard. I mean, trying to type up the transcripts is really, really difficult, but one of the lads there did talk about, well, basically he mentioned, I've been going through a tough time myself, and he talked about the fact that for 3 or 4 days he didn't want to talk to anybody, he just completely isolated himself, but eventually one of his fellow Youth Reach attendees approached him. He just said that made all the difference. So the importance of reaching out to others and the importance of social support, I think, came across really strongly for us. And beyond that, again, from the point of view of mental health literacy, we were interested in what the young people knew about mental health services or services generally, and how to get help and support. And I suppose one of the key things for us was the guys and girls that we met were really happy talking about mental health. They were comfortable. They didn't wonder, why are you here talking to us about mental health? That was completely natural for them. But when it came to getting support, they were less sure and less confident. Not unanimously, but definitely less sure. So for us, there was something about services being user-friendly and getting out to where young people are. I've mentioned the concept of mental health literacy, and some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with it. It basically has to do with knowledge and understanding around mental health, but also, more importantly perhaps, knowing how to get support and help if you are going through a tough time, or if you know somebody who is. So we use the case studies, and you can read about the detail in the report. I won't go into it in too much detail. We use the case studies to tease that out with the young people we met by giving them stories and helping them to imagine those scenarios. And we gave a score to each of our respondents based on recognising what was going on, understanding the signs and symptoms that determined that there was something not quite right, and then knowing how to get support and help. So on that basis, just one standout stat included a statistically significant difference between the young guys and the young girls. So maybe that's something that's intuitive for us. The young girls did seem to be much more tuned in, particularly in terms of how to get support. So that was important for us. The case studies themselves looked at depression, anxiety, and the signs and symptoms of schizophrenia or psychosis, as well as a tough time. In terms of differences in recognising those, again, it might not be too surprising that depression was the most commonly identified or labelled, if you like, mental health problem. Anxiety less so, with 20% identify that this person was experiencing the signs of anxiety, and again, schizophrenia or psychosis less so again. And so for us, that really guides our work in terms of the psychoeducation we deliver, but it says something about where the need is for mental health literacy, I think, in the country. Just to take you through the user profiling survey then, and I must acknowledge my colleague Fenella Murphy, who did a huge amount of work in terms of the user profiling, number crunching and data gathering. Again, we had ethical approval, as we did with the focus groups through UCC. Through the online survey, we had 523 respondents, who 40% of whom completed the survey right through to the finish. And it was a mainly structured questionnaire online. So again, just top-line results. We found an encouraging gender balance in terms of respondents to our user profiling survey. There was about 42% of respondents were male. And for us, that's important, especially when we think about our Australian colleagues who've conducted similar research, and they get over 70%, I think around 76% females through their user profile survey every year. So, when we think about youth male suicide rates in this country and what might be going on for young men, developing services for young men in particular, I think is very important. So we think we have developed something that young men will use to reach out through. We also asked about people's understanding generally about getting help and getting support through a tough time. And that chart is a little bit busy, but basically just looking at three statements. It's their understanding of how to get or who to talk to when going through a tough time, how to access professional help, and how to support a friend through a tough time. So interestingly, their understanding of who to talk to through a tough time and how to access a health professional was not great. I mean, it was just below 50% said not good at all or okay in terms of who to talk to, and just over 50% in terms of understanding how to access a health professional. More encouragingly, 65% of respondents felt they had good, very good or excellent understanding in terms of how to support a friend. So that's interesting. Maybe it's something Irish about, I'll put up with my problem myself, but I'll definitely put my arm around my friend or my brother or sister. So that's something I think we need to really nurture, and again, it comes back to social support in many ways. And in terms of help-seeking preferences generally, so that we understand what it is that young people will and will not reach out to, again, it was the more informal sources of support that young people said they would be likely or very likely to turn to if they were going through a tough time. And I think in many ways, this doesn't say that traditional services are not understanding where young people are at or are not working. I think it's more about saying that we all need to work together to make sure that we can meet the needs of young people through formal and informal support. It's about working together in that way. We were also interested, apart from their general attitudes and knowledge around help seeking, in the young people who are coming to ReachOut.com and their previous experience of seeking help or getting help. From that point of view, very encouraging that over 70% had already spoken to a friend through a tough time. And interesting that the 35% had been to a health professional for support through a tough time. But looking at that 35%, and the numbers are going to get fewer, I'm nearly at the end of the numbers, I promise. Looking at that 35%, many of those 41% were reluctant to go back to get support from a health professional again in the future. And again, for us, that suggests to us that we need to all work together, traditional services and online services. I'm conscious that there's some traditional service deliverers in the audience, and it's not. This is about opening up a conversation. It's not anything else. Important for us too, because ReachOut.com, in the title of the service, it explains quite a bit about what we do, and we know it's working from the point of view that young people in psychological distress or experiencing psychological distress are coming to ReachOut.com. We used Kessler's scale to measure psychological distress through the sample, and 2/3 of them had experienced severe or moderate levels of psychological distress. So we know that we're providing a service for people who really, really need it. And in that context, where we have to think about the society in which we live and the ability to get social support as well as formal or more traditional support, and research across the country with adult samples recently has looked at this question around do you agree that anyone can experience a mental health problem, and put that alongside the question, would you want others to know if you had experienced a problem? And there's something in the space between those two bars that says something about the stigma. So over 90% of the young people on our survey agreed anyone can experience a mental health problem, but nearly 6 out of 10 said they wouldn't want anyone else to know if it was them. And I know Sea Change have recently looked at this as well and found similar results. So we really want to get that 59% down to nothing is our target in all this, I think. And it is important to think about the context in that way. So just by way of finishing up, as Elaine mentioned, the research that we've done, a lot of it has to be about finding out how we're doing. Is the service that we deliver meeting need? And we were encouraged by the results that we found, where by 2/3 of the respondents had said that ReachOut.com was a site they trust and would recommend to a friend.